Welcome to Personal Injury Claims Explained by Foyle Legal, your trusted source for personal injury claims in Western Australia. Each week, we simplify complex legal issues, from motor vehicle accidents to workplace injuries, so you can confidently navigate your rights and secure the compensation you deserve.
Ever see a car nearly hit someone walking and it just makes your heart stop?
Oh, yeah.
Like just the other day,
It happens all the
I'm
time,
driving down,
especially in Perth.
in Perth. It seems like it happens all the time here, which is why today we're doing a deep dive into what happens when a pedestrian gets hit by a car in WA.
Right.
And to help us with this deep dive, we're taking a look at this blog post from Foyle Legal, which is a personal injury law firm in Perth.
Okay.
And
That's interesting.
yeah, they specialize in these kinds of cases. So I thought they would be the perfect people to
Yeah.
learn a little bit more about.
Yeah. And this is something that I think a lot of people don't realize, but pedestrians are actually very legally protected in
Yeah.
WA.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Before we even get into that, let's define what a pedestrian accident is. I mean, we all kind of know someone's walking, they get hit by a car.
Right.
But this blog post goes into a little bit more detail about all the different ways that someone can be considered a pedestrian when they're involved in one of these accidents.
Yeah. Like you said, it's not always as simple as just walking. Say you're out jogging
Right.
or even just standing really near a road and a car comes up on the curb and hits you. That is still a pedestrian accident.
Right.
And it really highlights how vulnerable pedestrians are compared to someone inside a vehicle.
Yeah, you've got airbags, you've got seat belts.
Exactly.
You're just kind of out there.
Yeah, you've got your sneakers.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Exactly.
So because of that, WA has actually taken a really proactive approach to pedestrian safety, which I think is really commendable.
Okay.
They have this whole initiative. It's called Towards Zero.
Towards zero.
Towards Zero.
Okay.
And it's literally what it sounds like. They're aiming to have 0 road deaths in WA.
Wow. That's a big goal.
It is a big goal. And the thing is, they're not just focusing on drivers, They're taking a really holistic approach. They're looking at legislation, enforcement. They're talking about actually changing the infrastructure of the roads, making them safer for pedestrians. And then there's also a big public education component, which is probably how you found this deep dive.
You know me too well.
That's the hope.
So let's say the unfortunate happens and someone's been hit by a car. What should they do immediately? And this blog post goes into some really good detail.
Yeah, it does.
The first thing, and this is even before anything else, is safety. If you can, move yourself to a safe spot, out of the way of traffic.
Right. Don't want to cause another accident.
Exactly. If you're seriously hurt, try to signal for help, but don't put yourself in more danger.
Right.
Obviously, call 000 immediately, get the police on their way, get an ambulance on the way. Even if you think the injuries are really minor, you just never know what might surface later on.
And this is interesting to me because I didn't realize how important this next part was. Foyle Legal, they really emphasize taking photos.
Photos are huge.
Like a lot of photos, like more than you think you need.
Yeah, and this is where it gets interesting, right? Those photos can actually end up being your most valuable asset.
It's like a time-stamped visual record of the scene, right? And that's way more powerful than just words, especially when it comes to any kind of legal situation.
So it's evidence, right?
Exactly.
Like what kind of photos are we talking about here?
Anything and everything. The position of the vehicles, the traffic signals, if there are any pedestrian crossings, any visible injuries. Shoot, even the weather conditions that day, Like if it was pouring rain or there was really bad visibility, that can actually be a factor.
Because people's memories can get foggy, but a photo is what it is.
Exactly. You can't argue with a photo. It's objective proof of what that situation looked like right after the accident.
Right.
Which can make all the difference if you end up pursuing a claim.
And it could really help you later on down the line
Oh, yeah, for sure.
if you have that evidence.
Yeah.
What else?
And don't forget, super important, exchange information with the driver, any witnesses, if there are any around.
Okay, so we're talking like names, phone numbers.
Exactly. And insurance details,
Okay.
especially for the driver.
Makes sense. That's who you'd be dealing with.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So let's say you've done all that. You're ready to dive into the legal stuff.
Okay.
This is where it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
Because WA law is actually very pedestrian friendly.
Oh, okay. Interesting. How so?
Well, they have this law. It's called duty to stop and assist.
Duty to stop and assist. I mean, I guess the name says it all, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
But basically, if you're driving and you're involved in a pedestrian accident, You are legally obligated to stop and help.
Got it.
And get this, if you don't, we're talking hefty fines, license suspension, even jail time,
Wow.
depending on how bad the situation is.
They mean business.
They do. They're serious about this.
Okay.
Which I think is a good thing.
Yep.
So, yeah, that's a big one.
Okay, so what about if the pedestrian, let's say, is partially at fault? What happens then?
That's a great question. And this is the thing that really surprised me about WA law.
Okay.
You can actually still be eligible for compensation, even if you were partially at fault.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Even if you were like, I don't know, 50% at fault?
Yeah, you heard right.
Uh-huh.
The amount that you receive might be adjusted
Okay.
based on your level of responsibility, but you're not automatically disqualified for making a claim.
That's interesting.
It's a common misconception. People think that.
Yeah, I would have thought so too.
If you're at fault at all, that's it. You get nothing.
Yeah.
But WA law recognizes that it's rarely black and white.
Right.
These things happen.
It's not always one person's fault.
Exactly. So yeah, there's this shared responsibility.
Okay, so let's say someone decides to pursue a claim.
Okay.
What does that look like? What's the process like?
So first step is you got to report the accident.
Right.
And here's another little WA quirk. You actually report it to a body called ICWA.
ICWA, what is that?
So ICWA stands for the Insurance Commission of Western Australia.
Okay.
So you're not actually going directly through the driver's insurance.
Okay, interesting.
You can, but ultimately ICWA manages the compulsory third-party insurance here in WA.
So they're going to be involved at some point.
Exactly.
Got it.
So you report it to them, and this is where all that meticulous documentation we talked about earlier becomes super important.
Right, the photos and everything.
Exactly. Gather everything, medical records detailing all your injuries, police report if there is one, witness statements if you have any, and of course, those photos and videos we talked about.
So it kind of sounds like this would be the point where having a lawyer would be really helpful.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Especially if you're dealing with injuries.
Yeah. You're not thinking straight. You're trying to get your life back on track.
Yeah, you don't want to have to deal with all this legal jargon and...
Exactly. And that's something Foyle Legal, they really emphasize that as well.
Okay.
Having a personal injury lawyer who specializes in pedestrian accidents, it can be invaluable. They just know the ins and outs of the system. They can help you build a strong case, and they'll handle all the back and forth with ICWA, with the insurance company.
They deal with this stuff every day.
Exactly. You don't have to worry about it.
Right.
So it's not mandatory. You don't have to have a lawyer.
Right.
But it can make a world of difference.
Okay, so you've reported it. You've gotten your evidence together. Maybe you've gotten a lawyer.
Yep.
What's next?
So then ICWA, they review everything. They look at the accident report. They look at your medical records, all of it. And they use that to figure out liability.
Liability, meaning who was at fault.
Exactly. And to what degree.
Okay.
And once they've got a handle on that, then they start looking at how much compensation you could be entitled to.
Yeah.
And this is another area where having a lawyer is really helpful because they're skilled negotiators.
Right.
They'll work with ICWA to make sure that you're being treated fairly.
Because I imagine it's not as simple as just, okay, my medical bills were this much. Like, there's other factors.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Like how this has impacted your life in other ways.
Yeah. Things like lost wages, if you couldn't work because of the accident,
Right.
cost of ongoing care, rehab, all that gets factored in.
It can get complicated.
Yeah.
So it's good to have someone who knows the ropes.
Definitely.
Real
I'm
important.
sure it can make a huge difference in terms of making sure you're getting a fair settlement.
Okay, so a settlement, that's basically an agreement between you and the insurance company
Exactly.
on how much they're going to give you.
Right. And a good lawyer will work to get you the best possible settlement without having to drag things out in court.
Yeah, you don't want to go to court.
Nobody wants to go to court.
So if you can avoid it,
Right. Yeah. It just drags things out. It's stressful.
much better to come to a fair settlement and then you can move on with your life. And
Exactly. Focus on your recovery.
exactly.
And speaking of lawyers, Foyle Legal, the firm behind this blog post, they're big on the whole no win, no fee thing.
Oh, yeah. No win, no fee. I've heard that phrase, but I never really understood what it meant.
Yeah, it sounds a little too good to be true, but it's actually pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Okay.
Basically, you don't pay them their fees unless they win your case.
Oh, go ahead.
So if they don't get you any compensation, you don't owe them anything.
Okay. So that takes the pressure off a little bit,
Exactly. Makes it a little less risky.
especially when you're probably already dealing with medical bills.
Right. Exactly.
Makes it a little easier to get that help.
And here's another thing I found really helpful. They offer a free claim check on their website.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah. So you can just kind of see where you stand
Okay.
without any commitment.
That's good to know. Get a little assessment.
Exactly.
See if it's worth pursuing.
Exactly.
Love it. Knowledge is power.
There you go.
Well, this has been a really interesting deep dive.
Yeah, a lot to think about.
You know, I really learned a lot about what happens.
It's complicated.
Yeah, I had no idea. It was so complicated.
It's not as simple as it seems.
And I really appreciate the fact that WA is taking pedestrian safety so seriously.
Yes, absolutely. That Towards Zero initiative, it's ambitious.
It's great. Yeah, they're really trying to make a difference.
Yeah, it's not just about pointing fingers. They're trying to actually change things.
Yeah, I like that it's not just focused on drivers.
Exactly. We all have a part to play.
Right, whether you're behind the wheel or you're out for a walk, just being more aware.
Being aware, being predictable.
Right, it all makes a difference.
Absolutely.
Well, that about wraps it up for this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. It's been a pleasure. And until next time, stay curious and stay safe out there.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to Personal Injury Claims explained by Foyle Legal. Remember, this podcast is for informational purposes and isn't legal advice. For advice specific to your situation, visit us at Foyle Legal. And don't forget to subscribe or leave a review.